Well, good evening. Welcome. I missed you all last week, and thank you to Florian for covering for me. It was a lovely, lovely birthday celebration. Uh, Great to see you. I'm really glad to be here. I don't know why. I was feeling a few of you emailed me saying that you thought I was really funny. And I don't think of myself as being funny, but I am. I've probably said this already, that I feel like this is all just practice for my comedy routine, which I want to call sit down comedy, right? It's a variation of stand-up comedy. And I think where I'm going with this is I was thinking about getting started tonight. I was wanting to kind of channel, I used to every night watch Jon Stewart and The Daily Show, and I loved his energy at the beginning. We have a really great show for you tonight. And I was thinking, we have a really great show for you tonight. Uh, Actually, I don't know how great a show it is. You're kind of the show, but I particularly like um, the piece that we're going to look at tonight um, in Dogen's writing. Not that I can't at all claim to understand it. I think I'd be wary of anyone who claims to understand what Dogen is really saying, but there is something I think particularly beautiful and poetic and I think um, worthy of attempting to study and understanding. Um, so the piece of writing that I thought we'd look at tonight, I'll just read it. It goes like this. It says, "Firewood becomes ash. Ash cannot become firewood again. However, we should not view ash as after and firewood as before. We should know that firewood dwells in the Dharma position of firewood and has its own before and after. Although before and after exist, past and future are cut off. Ash stays in the position of ash with its own before and after. As firewood never becomes firewood again after it has burned to ash, there is no return to living after a person dies. However, the Buddha Dharma, it is an unchanged in Buddha Dharma, it is an unchanged tradition not to say that life becomes death. Therefore, we call it no arising. It is the established way of Buddha's turning the Dharma wheel not to say that death becomes life. Therefore, we call it no perishing. Life is a position in time. Death is also a position in time. This is like winter and spring. We don't think that winter becomes spring, and we don't say that spring becomes summer." So there's a lot there, and I think it's possible to spend, many days and weeks studying this. But I want to stay with the first couple sentences for right now. Um, Firewood becomes ash. Ash cannot become firewood again. However, we should not view ash as after and firewood as before. Firewood dwells in the position of firewood and has its own before and after, and ash has its own position and its own before and after. So of course, he's using this as a metaphor to look into these incredibly, deep questions about self and selflessness, and in particular, time, right? And that's the query here is that, you know, if we take what he's saying, you know, literally, he's saying that there is no continuous self, right? There's no person direct, you know, there's no orchestra leader inside of us, despite our how much we feel that and live that and hold on to there being some sense of a continuous self. Um, but it's interesting that, you know, again, it's something that Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy has gone through great, um, you know, so much work in proving or identifying, you know, beyond any reasonable doubt, right? That there is no, what we think of as self is not a reality. And neuroscience has, in the last, you know, 10 or 20 years, come to the same conclusion. You know, they've really tried to, using neuroimaging and brain science, all of the whatever tools they have at their disposal. You know, of course, for our as a convenience, we can identify as a self, you know, and has our we identify as having a past, a present, and a future. But the point of this is to see that those are convenient fictions, and uh, and then there's the question, like, well, wow, what do we do? What do we do with that, or what does that have to do with our day-to-day lives now? What does it have to do with our work, our relationships, our identities? But in some way, you know, if we take to heart what Dogen is saying, it's that each moment that we're alive is a different reality. And I think we know this in some way, but it's really the other story, the other explanation of continuous self and past, present, and future is just so compelling. And this other idea is so inconvenient, and frightening, and impractical. But yet, though, I think what Dogen is pointing to is a path toward, you know, freedom from our stories, freedom from our past, and freedom from whatever we might be worrying about in terms of our future. It's this sense of this radical sense of nowness, and as if you've looked at Shohaku Okamura's commentary on this particular piece of writing, he actually spells out, he said, you know, he has the word now, and even as we say that word, you know, the N is immediately in the past, and the W, you know, so it's like this sense of time and this sense of present moment is just so slippery and difficult to fathom and enter and live. Maybe I will. I was debating. There's a one of my favorite Zen novels is a book called "For the Time Being" by Ruth Ozeki, and in the back of her book, she has a kind of I think it's in the appendix, where she has a story that I've read a couple. I don't think I've read it here yet during practice period. Have I? I don't think so. I know I've read it. I've read it several times in our local Mill Valley meetings because I just love this. It's a very short story about time, and the book itself. It's a novel, but throughout the book, there's some examination of Dogen's sensibility around time and being, and he also wrote a very there's a whole, maybe someday we'll study. Dogen has done a lot of writing about time and being, the interrelationship of time and being. But this short story that I'm going to read, one of the characters in this novel is the book is about a 13-year-old Japanese teenager who is really struggling being a teenager, and particularly struggled living in Silicon Valley, and then struggled even more when her family moved back to Japan as a teenager. But one of the characters is her grandmother, who is an old Zen nun named Jiko. So this is a story about Jiko and her kind of talking to this young girl who's the main character in the story. Now, this is just very short. So the Zen nun Jiko once told me in a dream that you can't understand what it means to be alive on this earth until you understand the time being. And in order to understand the time being, she said, you have to understand what a moment is. So in my dream, I asked her, what on earth is a moment? And she said, a moment is a very small particle of time, so small that one day is made up of 6,400,099,980 moments. When I looked it up, I discovered this was the exact number cited by Zen Master Dogen. 6,400,099,980. That's how many Zen Master Dogen positive are in one day. And then old woman Jiko snapped her fingers. And she said to me, please try it. Did you snap your fingers? Because if you did, that finger snap equals 65 moments. And she leaned forward, her black frame glasses on her nose, peering through her lenses. And then she said, if you start snapping your fingers now and continue 98,463 and 77 times without stopping, the sun will rise and the sun will set, and the sky will grow dark and the night will deepen, and everyone will sleep. And while you are still snapping until finally, sometime after daybreak, when you finish up your 98,463,077th snap, you will experience the truly intimate awareness of knowing exactly how you spent every single moment of a single day of your life. The old woman then sat back. The thought experiment she proposed was certainly odd, but very simple. Everything in the universe is constantly changing. Nothing stays the same. And we must understand how quickly time flows if we are to wake up and truly live our lives. That's what it means to be a time being, old Jiko told me. And then she snapped her crooked fingers again and said, and just like that, we die. So going back to Dogen, firewood becomes ash. Ash cannot become firewood. We should not view ash as after and firewood as before. Firewood dwells in the position of its own before and after. And although before and after exist, past and future are cut off. And the same is true of ash. So I want to stop there. I hope this is all perfectly clear.